When did that switch happen from where
Well,
you produce things and you bring it to them or mail it because you didn't have FedEx, right,
yeah,
or
yeah,
UPS even?
yeah. But even when FedEx started, you were they still you know if you lived in New York,
Right.
they didn't trust getting somebody necessarily from the West Coast.
Mm. Because couldn't be sure that they would get it there in
Yeah,
time.
yeah. They needed that original. They needed the original there, and a lot because a lot of times illustration work it wasn't just separated with a like a 4x5 transparency or 8x10 transparent. They put it on a drum.
Yeah.
It was drum scanner, right? You've
Yeah, the
seen these things.
original.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, the original. And so you actually had to work on a piece of flexible
Yeah.
board.
Right.
And what I would do is take the illustration board, which was a real high end 100% Strathmore board, which I really liked painting on. And in those days, the quality was really, really good with this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So you could split it and peel it.
Yes.
And so you paint it on it
I
while it
got
was
it.
rigid, right?
Yeah, and then you split it, then you can
split
put it on the drum.
and put it on the drum.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and it was and when I say curved around a drum, those drums are pretty big.
Yeah,
So it
no,
wasn't like
I've
a
seen
tight
those.
curve,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But they gave just really nice reproduction when they did that.
Yeah, and there was one place that you didn't live, Durango, because you couldn't get FedEx, right? I mean,
Bought some land there. We were going to move there, and we couldn't. And we once you became dependent upon it, it was like, oh man, we got to have this several days in the week, and sometimes all through the week.
Right.
And you can't. You really needed it to be.
And you had agents that were in San Francisco and New York, right?
Yeah, and then at one point I had one in Chicago and one in LA, but
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. So those are the places they're going,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, because all the publishers, and this was true way back, and it's still true.
Mm-hmm.
It is all your paperback publishers, most of your magazines, not all of them, but most of them were out of New York,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the big agencies were in Chicago, and they did expand. They L.A. certainly had a lot, but not too much in the publishing stuff. They had some magazines that were being done, and posters and things like that. And some of the best jobs that illustrators got in the I would say probably starting in the 70s, some of the 60s also, but were two things. One was the paper companies. The paper companies were just because they wanted to promote how beautiful their paper was or how it worked with imagery on it.
Like stationery papers?
No,
or
like
kind of paper
like
companies?
Mohawk was one of them,
Uh-huh.
and it was. And I don't know whether they're still around. Maybe they are, but they were just beautiful, different tones, different colors, different textures.
Mhm.
This is when they first started doing all their, oh, hey, this paper looks like linen, or this paper looks like this, or so. They wanted to promote that, and they would just do just wonderful promotions. I mean, big calendars,
Mm-hmm.
and again, pre-digital, where people actually needed a calendar in their
Right.
office or on a wall,
Right.
right? But they would be an illustration, 12 of them. That would be a big job.
Yeah.
12 big, beautiful paintings, just for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a theme, right? But
Right.
and then also companies would do it. Like I remember there was a great illustrator named John Berkey,
Mm-hmm.
and he would do these calendars for Texaco.
Mm-hmm. I saw that. I know those.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
remember those.
Yeah, you
actually.
remember those?
I do.
Yeah,
Growing
and
up
they
in
were
eastern New Mexico.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they were different locations, right?
Yes.
And they were just, and he was a great illustrator. He would do things like, I mean, he was really known for his space stuff. He would do these beautiful. I'm sure you've seen these too, on the covers of book covers,
Mhm.
paperback book covers. Just way before Star Wars, he would create these just
Mm-hmm.
spaceships that you just go, that was incredible.
This is Berkey.
Yeah, Berkey, John Berkey, and but he could paint just anything, and he painted in acrylic, and it was just gorgeous little paintings of farms, and he'd do anything. But those were again, calendars were a big
Right.
thing, and the paper company promotions, and I did a few of those, which were really nice. They were just like they weren't even calendars; they were like almost like a little portfolio that they would send to printers
Mm-hmm.
and say, here's what's available, and within that were here's my paintings of Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and
Right.
different,
And where do
that
those
kind of-
paintings end up that you do? I mean, do they get the paintings?
No, not
Or
now.
do they send it back? Or-
Yeah, that in the old days it was tricky. People would keep them, right? They just
Mhm.
could keep them.
Yeah.
Or they'd somebody have them on their wall, take them home,
Right.
they just disappear somehow.
Right.
And then it got to the point where people wanted them back.
Yeah.
And I wanted it back.
I would think.
I wanted it back.
You owned it.
I wanted it. Yeah. So it got to the point where you were writing a contract, with them, or your agent was writing a contract saying, "Hey,
Original art stays with me.
original art
Artist.
is not, or something on to the extent of copyright does not transfer unless the artist has been paid for the purchase of the original art,
X.
whatever.
Right.
There's some way of wording it, right?
And do you still have some of that?
Yeah.
Some of those?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still have some. I have a lot of them. Now, I was lucky. Some work was very either technical or kind of dry, or it was. But a lot of the work I was doing at the highlight of what the
Mm-hmm.
or the high point, I'd say, of my illustration work, which I'd say was the '80s and early '90s,
Mm-hmm.
was I was painting. I was able to
Right.
do oil painting, not just hey, I'm doing a watercolor or a little sketch,
Right.
or I'm doing something that is just for reproduction. I was actually doing oil painting.
Yeah, that's how I found you.
Yeah,
Yeah, on the Smithsonian Magazine.
yeah.
I think it was the Bozeman Trail, was it?
Bozeman Trail.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was at my dad's, and he had the Smithsonian, and I saw this beautiful, and I read it, and I see these beautiful paintings that illustrate the Bozeman Trail, and you could see the strokes.
Yeah.
Every one of them. I was like, God, this person can really paint.
Yeah.
Who is this woman? And I tracked you down and said, no, I'm not a woman, but still will
Yeah.
be interested. And that's, I think, kind of when you were starting to move away really from illustration and go into fine art.
Well, yeah. I was trying to get. I was certainly thinking that way. I mean, I thought that way for a long time, but illustration was lucrative,
Yeah.
for one thing. And if you think about it, right, when you're an illustrator, you get assigned a job. You agree upon a price. They either have a budget or they want you to bid on it, and then you go back and forth a little bit until you settle on something, and then it's like that's set. So going into it,
Money coming in.
yeah, you know that you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
As long as you're working for somebody reputable, and
Right.
and, I mean, there were people that
sure.
but if you're working with it, and that's the beauty of working with an agent, right?
Right.
The same way working with a gallery.
Dealer.
too.
Yeah, same thing.
Somebody that protects you from the sharks and the bad people out there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that can
Right.
happen.
Oh.
Big time, right?
Yeah, and they can be the sharks
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. But that's a big psychological difference.
I'm sure.
And so when you're doing that, you go, okay, I know what I'm going to make for this. I know, okay, within 30 days after
Right.
that, you're going to get paid, or
Yeah.
60 or whatever it is, and then agents take, these mine take 25%, right?
Right.
So it's you kind of go like, okay. So when you start looking at a 60-40 or a 50-50 split, and then you think, you're doing paintings, and I don't know what they're going to sell.
Right.
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's the key. You
Then
don't.
So it's a jump. It's a leap
Mhm.
to say, I'm going to not do this and do this.
Right. Yeah, it's scary, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And you don't know. And you don't have any record of whether it's going to sell or not.
No.
Right?
No. I mean, you can have beautiful work, but that doesn't mean you
Banks
either,
might fail. You just don't know.
The subject matter may not be there. The approach, and back to Mark English, he made a leap where he just wanted to do it, and he had his first show. I don't know where it was. Maybe it was in Kansas City where he lived.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure, but it didn't sell that well.
Mm.
Just didn't sell it well. And he realized, and I'm not sure whether somebody mentioned this to him. I think maybe somebody did. Somebody used the word wall appeal or something like that.
Right.
That because he was used to painting. If you see his illustration work, it's all flat. It's it's beautiful. It's gorgeous stuff, but it doesn't have depth. It doesn't have it has more of a poster feeling as opposed to
which would make sense because he was an illustrator.
Yeah.
And so how did that work for him? Was he able to carve out a fine arts career
Yeah,
too?
because he started moving into more textural stuff. And he started doing a thing where he was painting. He loved and I'd always questioned why, but he loved the black of roofing. I think it was roofing tar.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would put this roofing tar on as a and then work out of that black. Mm. And you see this dark. It was beautiful. He'd do these landscapes, very designed landscapes, trees coming down and mountains and whatever. And you see this dark, and you go, "Wow, it's so rich."
Right.
And it was the roofing tar.
Yeah. Well, and only an illustrator could probably think of something like that to some extent.
Yeah. And then he went from there. So and he was doing, but it had. But just becoming aware of, this isn't about how a big piece is going to look when it's reduced down and printed.
Right.
Right. Sometimes he would a piece that reduced down to a stamp size. He had the skill set to make it look really great. Right. It was about putting it on the wall.
Right.
And lighting it. And does somebody want to walk by it several times in the day? And then after a year, walk by it and still like it and still appreciate it. And so he had to learn that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know where he falls in the range of value for his illustrations versus his fine art. My guess is his illustrations may actually have more value.
No, his fine art got up there.
It's
a pretty good range. Yeah. He was getting some pretty good money for his paintings, because he did a few pretty iconic things over and over again that people really loved. His stylization of horses. There were these portraits he did that were just they were just stylized enough, and the way he designed. He still used all of his skill set as an illustrator, but he just learned how to.
Did he stop illustrating and just do fine art?
Yeah.
He did.
But he also got, he had the financial means to do it because he had
done so well.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he would just get paid crazy money. I mean, just really, really well.
Yeah, he was one of the best.
Yeah, and also he was fast.
Yeah,
and he was also just. Yeah.
Or he had fast people that would help him.
He did have fast people that would help him.
Yeah, I know Thomas Blackshear helped him.
Thomas did. There are other people that also helped him. I have another good friend who helped him a lot on different things. Yeah. And which is that's an old tradition.
Yeah, sure.
It goes back in the fine art world too.
It goes in the Native American world if you're making Pueblo pottery together.
Yeah. You had apprentices, you had people that were just, it's a process kind of thing. And it actually is kind of nice. I like working with people. I always wanted to do projects with people, from because I had different students and different people in like a larger studio setting early on, And I always liked the idea, like,
Yeah.
hey, maybe we could do something. But a lot of people didn't want to do that because they were just like, no, this is mine. It felt like to them, like, no, this is, it's too personal. It's too.
Yeah, but we see musicians do this all the time.
Well, that's
right?
it. That's a great example. Musicians, that's what's so great about music is, yeah, you can sit there and play a guitar by yourself, but you get somebody on some drums and a bass and another guitar, and you got the Beatles. You know, I mean, right? I mean,
or you put Lady Gaga with Tony Bennett.
There you go.
And you have fantastic music that you would think would never be together, but is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
I mean, and actors the same way. You can't act alone.
Yeah.
I mean, except one act plays or something, or one person plays. But basically, it's an ensemble, and painters, and it's a different thing.
Preston Singletary, the ceramicist. I mean, he works with a lot of different artists, like Tammy Garcia and some other ones. So, it makes total sense.
I think it's fun. I mean, I know it's harder to establish yourself as a, if you did it all the time,
right?
You got to establish yourself as a,
you have your
as
area.
an entity,
right?
Yeah. Sorry.
And so, how has illustration changed? I mean, it's like night and day. I mean, I understand that, but just how do you see it?
Well, okay. So if you go back, like the quick history of it, right? Certainly, I mean, you can go all the way back to Michelangelo and the cave paintings, right?
Maybe, that's true.
But Michelangelo, he was an illustrator.
Right.
He was illustrating whatever on the ceiling. That was a commission.
Sure.
That was a and it had to look the way he wanted it to look, but it had to please somebody.
Right.
Yeah. And he was getting paid for it because to do that, that's probably not what he would choose to have done. That kind of, but if you fast forward through early illustration with woodcuts and all that sort of thing, where they could easily have some kind of press that could print early images, into books and such, and then you get into like the early days of illustration, where you had Howard Pyle and you had Frederick Remington, you had some
N.C. Wyeth.
Well, but N.C. Wyeth came up after he was a student of Howard Pyle.
Yeah. So
in Howard Pyle's early days, and Remington's early days, they couldn't reproduce color. So what they had, or they couldn't even reproduce photographically yet your painting. So what your painting would be, this beautiful painting, and it would go to the wood engraver.
Right.
And the wood engraver was the real artist on this, and he would copy your values.
Right.
And so you see those early reproductions.
Like Bierstadt did those for Different and Moran both.
Exactly.
And I know some of those, like one of the Bierstadt took like 4 years or something to make an engraving.
So those engravings those people were crazy skilled, to be able to copy your painting, which is an oil painting, and to be able to capture it.
Right.
And you look at the original painting, and you look at that, and you go, "Wow, that's amazing!" And so during Pyle's time, they got to the point where they could reproduce color, right, and reproduce your painting,
right,
the actual painting, and then that moved on to, and Howard Pyle was so pivotal. I mean, just big time, because he had he taught, and he was a very he's a very good teacher, but he was also just he was taskmaster, tough, and so N.C. Wyeth, Frank Schoonover, Maxwell Parrish, Harvey Dunn, I mean, and on and on and on. All these guys were students, and there was women, Elizabeth Shippen Green and Jessie Wilcox Smith. There was some powerful golden age illustrators that came out of that school.
Right.
Yeah. And then there were others. There were others like J.C. Leindecker. They'd studied in Paris. He and his brother, Frank Leindecker.
And his work has started to bring huge money. Leindecker.
Crazy money.
Millions.
And they're beautiful things, too. And then Alphonse Bouca. It just on and on. There was a whole there was just all of a sudden in that golden age there was just so many, just so there were stories being illustrated, there were posters, there were
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of this stuff stems again from some of the stuff that was happening in Europe too. I mean, Toulouse-Lautrec was an
Right.
illustrator.
Right.
Flat out, he was.
Yeah,
Now
of course.
he certainly did paintings for himself, but he was doing
Big
Moulin Rouge
posters,
and all
yeah,
this
all that
other stuff, and Charest. All these guys were doing the big posters for musicals and,
Mm-hmm.
and for drinks and for and it was an explosion of and that was because they could reproduce it. They could
So
print
technology
technology.
changed, and it allowed them
Yeah.
to get wider distribution.
Yeah, and then you get into that got better and better, right? Into the 1920s,
Right.
and then you get into into all these influences of what was happening in
Mm-hmm.
Art Deco, Art Nouveau,
Right. And
all
photographs start coming in, so they
photographs
start
coming in.
competing.
Yeah, and they weren't competing big time then. They were
Yeah.
competing. They were there.
Right. It was
But-
faster.
It was faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they could do certain things. But,
Right. They become the reporters more than
Yeah,
the illustrators
exactly.
were.
And so in the 1940s, that's when that photographs really started coming in big time. Life magazine, Look
Right.
magazine,
Time.
all that stuff, and photographs were just in the 30s too, but 40s was big time.
Mhm.
It was. But so there were a lot of illustrators that in the 40s and 50s that were, they were top of the heap, right? They were millionaires. By today's standard, right? They were by whatever the dollar was worth then.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing really, really well. People like Dean Cornwell and there was a whole line of these people. And I didn't meet him before he died, but I wanted to. There's a guy named there's a guy named Mead Schaefer who was great. There was a guy named Saul Tepper who I got called up. I called him in New York and I talked to him on the phone. Great guy. He talked to me a long time, and he was an older guy. This was in the 80s, and I talked to him and I talked. We were talking about his work, and he goes, "How do you even know who I was?"
Yeah.
He didn't realize that there were people out there who were
Following him.
following and looking back and saying, "Oh man, you influenced my work like crazy."
Right.
Because he thought that was long gone, and we were, there were a group of us bringing back painting, actual oil painting into illustration, and he had done this, and I actually own a really nice. It's real beautiful piece that he did for an early magazine in I want to say 1918, 1920, something like that. And I own a Cornwell too, which is just, when you see these originals,
Right.
that they're just, you go, these things belong in museums.
Yeah, they are.
beautiful.
They're just great paintings.
They're just great
Same
paintings.
with Dixon.
Yeah, well,
just
it's
like
exactly
phenomenal.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Now Dixon because of the subject matter and because of the wonderful discovery of who he was and your promotion and just all this stuff, bringing him to up to the
To a
the
different
level,
Yeah,
a different level.
yeah. He's got. I mean, when you start having major museum shows by multiple institutions every 2 years or whatever, there's clearly something.
Well, but a lot of these guys too didn't go on to do their own personal paintings.
No.
Right? They stopped at a certain point. In fact, this guy Saul Tepper, who I was able to talk to a couple of times on the phone, he quit in the 1950s. This gets back to the idea of, well, nobody wanted his work. He was great. He paint circles around so many painters nowadays. I'm just so good, but he couldn't get work, and so he became an art director. And then what he was doing when I talked to him, he was restoring his old paintings because they were, chipping a little bit, and doing
Right.
I mean, but he never went into that world. There was another guy that Sue and I visited down in Carmel, Donald Teague.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
well,
Donald Teague.
oh yeah, I've had his work
Yeah,
actually.
and it was so funny because Sue paints in watercolor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I paint in oils, and I know, and Donald Teague was a student of Dean Cornwell and Frank Brainland,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, enthralled by those guys, and so I wanted to talk to Donald Teague.
Right.
He wanted to talk to Sue.
Yeah, because he does watercolor too.
Well,
Yeah.
he was really, because that's what he had gone past his illustration career,
Yes.
and he wanted to do his he was, well, basically what he did was he would take a trip to Spain,
Mm-hmm.
paint a bunch of paintings of Spain, and he knew a lot of people in Carmel, and they knew him, and they would buy his paintings
Right.
of Spain, right,
Yeah.
or whatever, and they were beautiful. They
Yes.
were really nicely
Yeah.
done. But so he and Sue had a better conversation, but I got to see a lot of his early illustration stuff that was just great. But
Well, there's this whole group of people your age that are, have made a transition to fine art, whether it's a Dennis Szymanski
Yeah.
or Eric Bowman or, Thomas Blackshear,
Yep.
Ezra Tucker, all these individuals. And it seems like all of you probably did this because in some way you were a little bit forced into the situation because of digital art. I'm assuming that's true to some extent. Things changed.
I think so. For myself, it was more an offshoot of people seeing my illustration work and then saying, "Hey, you want to show it?"
Yeah.
Like
That's what I did.
Pretty much what you did.
Yeah.
My other galleries saw my work in airline magazines.
Yeah.
Some other places, and it was all about that.
Mm-hmm.
One guy out in San Francisco, he was starting a gallery, and he had been an editor for a California lawyer magazine, and he was said, "Hey, Francis, I want to." I'd like to buy some of your work, and I said, "Well, I'm not really selling. I don't do that much."
Right.
And then he calls me up later, and he goes, "I'm starting a gallery, and I'll give you a one-man show." And he bought a few of my pieces
Right.
there. But we still have a relationship, that he sells some things,
Yes.
Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk or
Right.
whatever. But so I kind of morphed into it as opposed to a
Yeah.
steady, like, hey, I'm not getting any illustration work. And in fact, early on, it was, I've got too much illustration work. I can't manage.
Yeah, I think they were the same way, but I think they also saw the writing on the wall.
You did see and I saw the
Yeah.
writing on the wall at a point. I didn't want to, but it was less, I saw the writing on the wall because I was, and I'd already made that move. Which was, before I definitely saw it, but I didn't think in those terms because I was kind of gradually. It was a little bit more of a gradual.
Yeah,
I think
it's probably true for those other individuals
probably
too.
Probably.
I mean, as illustrators, you're very aware of what's going on in the art world. You have to be because you're involved with trends and different things. You have your pulse. You have the pulse of that community. Yeah. And I'm sure the talk was, oh, digital. Oh, we can get it faster. Can you do this? And then you go, okay. And did you do digital? Did you ever?
Never.
No, right?
Never. Now I did some things which were, oh, hey, I'm correcting some color or something. Once they, and I still do that. Where I like, hey, I paint a painting or I'm working on a painting. It needs to be reproduced somewhere,
right.
And I know I'm going to put a yellow wash on it, or I want to warm it up. I'm going to cool it down. It's almost done. I'll do it digitally, and just because I'm not done with it, right? Or something like that. But never actually painting it because it didn't interest me. It just didn't interest me.
Yeah, somebody was telling me a story within the last few months about somebody who did an illustration, old school illustration. They sent it to the art director, an actual painting. They go, "What do I do with it?"
Yeah,
they didn't even know what it was. How to handle it.
Oh, definitely. I because I used to get this thing, right? Send them boy, you paint them and go, wow, it's not dry. I'm going to build a little box for it,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and then send it wet, right?
Right.
And they'd open it, and you get this thing from different art directors. Oh, I love the smell of this,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's great, whatever, right? Because most art directors, creative designers, whatever, they went to art school,
Right.
and they got directed, or for whatever reason,
Right.
they started doing the art direction part of it as opposed to the painting part or illustrating part, and so but they still have nice memories of that.
Right.
And then there was a point where I remember I did the same thing. I sent the painting, and I remember my rep calling and going, oh, they don't take the original paintings anymore. And I'm going, oh, really?
What do I do with it?
Yeah. And they were able to, our rep was, luckily it was in New York, and they were able to go over and get a shot of it and whatever. But it's like they had no idea. What do we do with this? Why do we?
Right.
Yeah. Which was, I mean, that was a big eye opener for me.
Yeah, it must have made you feel old.
Yeah. Not old so much, but just,
Antiquated.
yeah, and well,
Outdated.
that was an abrupt change, though. That was definitely an abrupt change. But and then being asked also, well, so can I get this digitally? And I'm going, I can send you a digital shot of it.
Right.
Well, yeah, but then what if we need changes? Can we?
Right.
Can you do? And I'm going, no, that means I have to do changes on the painting. I can
Right.
do that, and so. And this was a big deal, right? Because in most of my illustration career, and certainly in Mark English's, certainly in most of these people we've been talking about, if you got a sketch okayed,
Mm-hmm.
you give them a drawing, you give them they know exactly what's going to be in it.
Right.
Sometimes, I never did this because I just didn't like to do it, so I would always avoid it. I never gave them color sketches, but a lot of people did. And then I would give them kind of color ideas,
right?
And saying, hey, it's going to be like this painting, that color range. If everything was agreed on, and then they go back and say, well, okay, wait, we have 3 figures in here and a car, and now we don't want the car anymore, and we want another figure. Well, you'd always go back and say, well, I can do that, but I have to charge you a change.
Right. Fee. Change fee. Like a contractor.
Like a contractor. And because it's a lot of work to do that on a painting. Yeah. Well, digitally, no. Easy. So the digital artists, they started getting used to the digital artist.
Yeah.
Just go, yeah, now I can take it out. Gone. Yeah. That's just a layer to them,
right?
Uh-huh. That's another layer. Right. So then they don't want to pay for changes anymore. They
I'm
just
sure
don't
not.
want to do that. So that became another sort of like it was a group of barriers that started happening. The idea that well, can we get it like really fast? Like, well, paint has to dry just a little bit. I got to So it got to the point.
I could just imagine on their end going, the paint has to dry? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah. But so it got to the point where when they wanted something that had a fine art look to it, feeling to it, and they wanted a real painting, then they would come to me. Or somebody like me, right? And so that is sort of, and so that's kind of what I do now. If somebody, it's not somebody going, oh, we just have to have,
if they want vinyl records, they come to you.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, which are back in.
Yeah,
but there's not a lot of people that make vinyl records. So
yeah.
But they want them.
But they want them. Yeah. So I mean, it's and it's still an okay experience.
Yeah, I'm sure the art schools are completely changed. Do they even teach drawing and painting in this fashion for illustration, or is it all done computer-wise?
I think
do you know?
Well, just from my experience, because I was before the pandemic and all of that, I was still teaching at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And my friend Chuck Pyle was still head of the illustration department.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this a lot. And he was still teaching, drawing from the model.
Mm-hmm.
I was still teaching, and I would even, my students would say, "Hey, can we do this assignment digitally?" I said, "No, I'm trying to teach you how to do this.
Right.
You can go back and do it digitally, or you can put it in digitally and do some things to it if you want. But I want to teach you this, how to approach it this way, and you can use it or not use it or whatever." And I think this break now, that
because of COVID, you mean?
Yeah, because the schools are closed, right?
Right.
In fact, I think the illustration school is still closed. I mean, Chuck retired, so he just and so once you have a lot of these people who were not digitally trained, understood it okay,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't teach it, weren't really enamored by it, then once that's gone,
Mm-hmm.
then you got a whole influx of new instructors there.
Right.
That's what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the students want.
Yeah.
That's what they understand.
And that's what sells.
That's what sells. That's what they understand, and they look at it as easier. And I would often say this to some of the students, that would look at their own projects and go, "Well, I'm going to do this digitally." I go, "Fine," and they would spend hours and hours trying to figure out, because they'd go back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
digitally, trying to figure out what they would do, because they had incredible choices, right? They had
Right.
just every choice in the world. It didn't have to do with their skill set. It had to do with their sense of being able to design and
Mm-hmm.
and land on something.
Mm-hmm. Now soon they'll just throw AI into it.
Yeah, and now AI is going to be a whole other thing.
I mean, they're going to have their own, coming to Jesus moment with AI, just like you did with digital.
They are.
They're going to have the same kind
They're
of
going
thing.
to have, and that will be a problem for them, because it's one thing to say, "Hey, I'm going to put in a bunch of Francis Livingston paintings, right, or whoever,
Right.
and say, "Hey, geez, paint like this. I want this. I want these elements in here, and I want
Right.
this subject matter. Let's see what you come up with." AI,
Right. Right.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Maybe something interesting might come from that. Maybe it's something, who knows? But it's another thing for somebody who's just digital, and which everybody has those tools. Easy for artificial intelligence to access that stuff,
Right.
and you're done. I mean, you really are.
Yeah. No. I see.
I think. I mean, and I don't say that in a like gleefully way, like, hey,
No.
but because it's too bad, because it's once you take that, the human touch out of creation
Mm-hmm.
of art, you take the soul out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You really do.
Mhm.
Maybe that's not necessary for what the purpose is of.
Maybe it comes off full circle, and they
Yeah.
start really want people who actually can draw and paint and things that can't
It could
be.
be. It could be.
Can't be AI for whatever period that will be, until AI gets
Yeah.
to the point where it's so you can't distinguish.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Probably we'll get there.
it's going to be interesting. It's just a.
Good thing you're a fine art painter.
Yeah.
Don't have to depend on it.
Yeah. I just, and I don't think it's going to. People talk about AI affecting the fine art world. I don't see how. I mean, I see how it can affect the print world, certainly.
Yeah. Well, it can affect our world too. It can affect it in the sense of for fakes and frauds and stuff.
Yeah.
So
It can.
then provenance may become more,
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sure. I think
Yeah.
it's closer scrutiny on everything, maybe.
Yeah, it's where people like me will probably be of more value, or people like me that have the knowledge of the
Sure.
provenance. They go, okay, they have all the Maynard Dixon paintings that he ever did, and AI can use his, they can break it down and go, I can make a new Maynard Dixon, but it still there's other things that go along with that.
Right.
And you have to know those other things. But
Yeah, and
who knows?
And I don't know. Maybe artificial intelligence. If that what that means now, what digital used to mean, right?
Yes.
And what it means now.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, think about how far that's advanced in such a very, very short time.
Yeah. Well, you've gone from taking a painting originally, making a wood block, cut it and painting it because you didn't have photographs to photograph to to digital.
And the speed of it now, everything's sped up, right?
Yeah.
So this is it could and it's certainly with illustration at least. What does the public care about, right? So if they even read Time magazine anymore, right?
They don't.
They don't. But
sure
but they still do illustrations for Time magazine.
Yes.
They still do illustrations for the New Yorker.
Yes.
Right. So, but and for certain other things. But if that work
not valued,
is not valued, if people don't. If people look at it and go, well, I don't care. So this was created by AI number 1 or AI number 5 or whatever. Right. It doesn't even. It's if that's what they get used to.
Mm-hmm.
It looks
like processed buns.
Yeah, exactly. and you're relegated to what some of my classes at the school were relegated to at some of the last classes. They were called legacy classes. Yeah. So it was a legacy. It was not.
So, and what did that mean exactly?
Well, it just that I taught traditional techniques. I thought in terms of
dead guy stuff,
stuff, stuff that.
How'd that make you feel being a legacy teacher?
There was always a handful though. There was always a handful of people that when they went back, and this again it's sort of like all things really,
right?
Just life in general. If you study history, if you're a student of history at all, if you love history, then you realize the importance of it and connect. If you don't, then it's like here and now. That's it.
Right. I don't think you can take history out of art personally. I think that.
I don't think
they're
so.
synonymous.
I don't think so because it is. It's and even more so now. And you look at all the great painters you have in your gallery and all the great painters out there and creative people. We're all connected to all this stuff in the past, and the best ones go back to the past to reach out and pull some of that stuff, and a lot of them actually are going back to the past of illustration and pulling some of that back. And I do that too. Yeah. I look back and I go, oh yeah, if I was doing that, I could use that because that's something I understand, but also something that can work within my artwork. It's a resource
you see it in your show that we have right now.
Yeah. For sure.
We were talking about some of the things that you were doing. One painting where you have these kind of bloom and shine sensibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, there's individuals I know that you feel connected to.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at one of your paintings and the Hennings that did the sunflowers.
Oh yeah.
We have this great painting in the show right now that emphasizes that other artists haven't done, contemporary ones, because it's too damn hard to do. And you're going to go see Dunton's show.
Yeah.
To just absorb, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's it's it should be, I think, this travels. These travels, this journey, if you want to call it that, of just exploration, of changing and learning, and not static at all. As long as you can do it, because that's what feeds the creativity. I think is staying humble for one thing, and going, wow, these people, look at these artists that did all this great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's history. That's not just the stuff that's being done now, but all
Right.
this body of great works that are out there that you can see. It's why.
Well, and I talked to you when you had this body of work for the show that I thought it was like the strongest show you've probably given me. I mean, we've done, I don't know how many shows we've done again, 15, 18, I don't know how many
A
we've
lot.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, I mean, and here you are having done this over whatever, 15, 20 years, probably 20, and you're doing material imagery that's better and more unique than I've seen.
Yeah. I stay hungry.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. I don't know. There's something, and I think this is probably true for all of the people that just are keep producing.
Yes.
Is you're reaching for that.
Yeah.
You're reaching, and you're not. Maybe you get there, but then there's something else above that,
Yeah.
and then above that, and it just is and you realize at a certain point, okay, I'm never going to get there. So that's not the goal
Right.
to get there. The goal is to reach
for it.
Right. Yeah.
I see this in my more mature artists, doing it, like Ed Mell looking at transcendental paintings and going, because of this big show that went through transcendental paintings, and he goes, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
How do I use that?
Yeah.
Terry
sure.
Moyer's doing some just more modern sensibility with the way she uses her backdrops against her figures. I mean, I just love it when I see artists that are reaching for that next level of exploration.
Sure. And that's because you naturally, when you're a younger artist, right? You're overwhelmed,
Right.
But you want it.
Right.
You want this stuff.
Right.
You want all this, and then when you're there, you go, I want more, and and it just is it's invigorating.
Yeah.
I want to go into my studio and go, I'm excited about this. I don't want to go in and go, I
got to do another
one. Yeah, I don't want that. I want to go. At the end of the day, if I didn't need to sleep, I wouldn't. That's the way I want to feel.
Well, it's your air supply, basically.
That's it.
Well, do you want to add anything else that we talked about a few things? But
yeah, no, I just I think in that world of illustration,
right.
I mean, I really think, as I've said before, it's sort of this kind of it's being discovered, but this undiscovered in a way, just world of just beautiful artwork that should be explored by everybody.
Yeah, I think some of that is starting to really find its footing.
Yeah.
And it can't help when price structures go really high for some of these. Linebacker,
exactly.
Rockwell, and
Dixon, and it's a lot of the comic art too is going up. I mean, Heritage Auction in some of those places, it's crazy what some of that stuff is going for, and
is it?
Well, some of it is, some of it is, but
I mean, is it crazy? Maybe.
No, is it crazy? No, it isn't. It shouldn't be.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be. But just from my own.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's hard to. Yeah.
Because. I mean, I had a gallery owner at one point say, "Hey, we don't mention the I word."
Illustration.
Yeah. We don't talk about that. I mean, so it's a big change from that.
Yes.
I never had a problem talking about illustration, but it was a thing. Hey, let's play that down a little bit.
I think it's a badge of honor, honestly. When I have a lot of people that are in my, stable of artists that were really they're more illustrators first.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, when I see that, I'm like, I want those people in my gallery.
And it really is another name for that is a working artist. Kind of, you are a working artist, and that's what it is.
You see the world a little differently. I think your work ethic is different. And
it is that, and
Yeah.
it's the work ethic, and it's also the you get over that fear
Mm-hmm.
of painting anything.
Right.
Right. That's because I've had people come up to me and say, well, "How do you do that? How do you switch from that to that?" And I go, "This is nothing. Switching from landscape to buildings, or from people to no people.
Right.
That's nothing compared to switching from images of cars to technical wiring stuff, or to a crowd scene, to a spacecraft. I mean, you realize I can draw or paint anything.
Yeah.
Not that I want to,
No.
but you can if you just go, hey,
yeah,
I can approach it the way I approach everything,
Yeah.
and research and do understanding and all that. And
also you know how to draw.
yeah, and it always gets back to drawing.
Yeah. Right. The great ones can draw.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
you being here for
Yeah.
the show that you're doing.
That was great.
And just, I know that to me, illustration is a very interesting realm that I don't think gets talked enough about. And unfortunately, individuals like yourself we're kind of at the end of that spectrum of those people. So, 40 years from now, which isn't that long, people will be listening to this podcast and go, wow, I didn't even know about all these things. They did this? Well, I mean, it will be that
Yeah.
way. It will have historical, relevance. Maybe already does. I don't know. It does to me.
Yeah.
And obviously to you too.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Francis.
Yeah,
I
you bet.
appreciate the time. All right.
Okay, Mark.
Francis Livingston.